everybody. This is the BOFCA.com podcast. I think we've come to call it the BOFCA.com Reparatory podcast. Episode number 2.
We need a cutesy shorter name.
Yeah.
BOFCast.
Okay, that's it.
And the
BOFCast.
person...
Okay, thank you all for tuning in. It's been fun.
That's Dan Kimmel, everybody.
All right, and that's Steve Head on the other mic.
Hello. And Monica Castillo,
Yes.
who writes for Pace Magazine, still impressing me with the Pace Magazine credit. And Dan, you have a new book. Well, new in the past 3-4 months.
My novel came out in January.
This year.
It's a secret, a novel about aliens, Hollywood, and the Bartender's Guide. And my reviews can be found at northshoremovies.net and the Sci-Fi Movie page and the Jewish Advocate.
We're here to talk about the new films that are coming to the Reparatory theaters in Boston. The Coolidge Corner, Brattle Theater, the Somerville Theater, the Museum of Fine Arts, the HFA. Right, who could forget the Harvard Film Archive? What with their Hitchcock films coming up?
Yep.
You know, glad you reminded me of that.
Yep, and we're going to get to all of those right now. I guess we'll dive in right to our next door neighbor over at the Coolidge Corner.
Let's rock. Let's do
Midnight
it.
Series. Steve's really excited. Not for Killer Clowns from Outer Space, unfortunately, but for...
Historically, I have to say that's one of like the hugest video successes in the 80s. It's probably because of the box art on that movie. But
I was going to say that box art is the only thing that I know about it, so I'm very excited to see it for that reason alone. I grew up seeing it at Walmart, and it just always freaked me out, and so now I'm just going to
It's a grade C movie, but it's a lot of fun. It's the Chiodo brothers. It's, you know, basically it's your worst clown nightmare come to life. It's
Perfect.
aliens invade a town and they're killing and destroying, and they're clowns.
Perfect midnight movie.
Right. Absolutely.
But the one that's got Steve all excited is certainly Friday the 13th, Part 8.
Oh.
Jason Takes
It's
Manhattan.
cheeseburger bad. It could be painfully bad, but it is entertainingly bad. Very little of it takes place in Manhattan.
That's perfect.
It's Jason Takes Manhattan. 80% of it takes place on a boat. By getting
Don't spoil it for people.
Well, this is just in the first couple minutes. In the first 5 minutes of these films, he's got to find a way to come back. In episodes,
It's been 8 times now.
in 7, The New Blood, he was brought back by a lady with telekinesis.
I
So this
saw
is a little
most of
more
those
plausible.
movies. I reviewed many of them. That one did not strike me as particularly memorable. I would have to look up which one. There was one that I felt there was a talent behind the camera who was sort of like waving over the junk at the audience, going, "There's a talent here. Let me make something intelligent." Because there was a scene where 2 younger kids are hiding under a bunk bed at the camp, and one of them turns to the other and says, "What did you want to be if you grew up?"
I'm not recalling this
Not
one.
that.
But no, they were all cheesy, disposable. Actually, the most amusing ones are the first couple because you're surprised who pops up in the cast.
Yeah, in particular, number 4. Crispin Glover, Corey Feldman.
Well, I'm thinking of Kevin Bacon.
Oh, right. Yeah, so
Johnny
he was in the
Depp in the
first.
first
He was
No,
in the
he's in
first.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Whoa,
A much better series.
Completely
Yeah.
missed that.
Yeah.
No, I haven't really seen much of either.
But Jason Takes Manhattan it's great
Anytime
chintz.
you get to a series that's like Part 8, Part 10, Part 13, yeah.
Yeah, they should be showing Nightmare on Elm Street, especially 1 and 3 are the ones to see. But
Jason Takes
you wanted Jason Takes Manhattan. Go ahead.
It's amusing. It's also the first of the series to not feature a stalled car.
Loss of a signature. That's kind of sad.
It's, it's prime 80. Well, actually, when did Jason Takes Manhattan? I think are we in the 90s when that came out?
It was 89.
89, yeah, because the series started, the late 70s, around 1980? It's post-Halloween. So, so it's like 1980, I think, is the first one.
Chris Cunningham basically made that film because of Halloween.
Yeah.
He makes no bones about that. It was basically a cheap ripoff.
Yeah. If you look at it's funny that there's actually some talented directors who came out of that schlock horror because a lot of this, Halloween is a great film, but if you look at the stuff like the Friday the 13th movies and some of the other ones, they are so disposable. Even when there's some talented people involved. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis was the Scream Queen for a few years, and you just don't want to watch some of those movies now. They're awful.
Well, I think that some movies they are seen as completely disposable, but Jason Takes Manhattan to me is it comes back. It can be appreciated for all of its total chintziness.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. You go see it and report back to us if it lives up to your expectations.
There's a scene. Okay, when Jason actually gets to Manhattan, there's a fist fight on the top of this building where the fellow that's trying to basically take down Jason with just his fists hits him with 78 straight punches, to try to get him to fall over the ledge of a building.
Yeah.
But then results in one of the most memorable kills. It's worth seeing.
Oh, please.
Well, that Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, will be playing at the Coolidge after midnight on Friday and Saturday, July 5th and 6th.
The brainlessness of it is amusing. Absolutely.
And on the same weekend is my pick.
What?
Bring It On.
You're going to have to take over from here.
Oh, it's one of the worst 90s movies, maybe. I love it. It's Kristen Dunst as a cheerleader who takes over the squad for her senior year, and everything that could go wrong does go wrong because she dropped the spirit stick. So it's very into that culture, and it's just a lot of fun. It's ridiculous.
Isn't Eliza Dushku in that as well?
Yes, she is.
Yes, because I remember when that came out. Now this is I was teaching at Suffolk, and her mother, Eliza Dushku's mother, teaches at Suffolk. Turns out her brother was in my class, and he said, "Did you see Bring It On?" I said, "I love Kirsten Dunst." He goes, "My sister was in that movie." Oh, no, and I like her. I like his sister too. I mean, they're both good.
The gymnastics star that ends up on the cheerleading squad because there's no gymnastics team.
Right. That's it was kind of a fun film. It's not no masterpiece by any means, but Kirsten Dunst, I think, is one of the finest of the young actresses who we've been watching basically since she was a kid. We've been watching her grow up in the movies, and I saw early on. My guess was she was going to go the distance, and I'm very pleased that I was correct in my prediction. And so it's interesting seeing some of the choices that she made along the way, because she's doing some really artistic stuff and some, entertainment stuff, and she's trying to find that balance, and I think that she's continued to do so.
Well, I'm a big fan of Bring It On. It was something that I watched as a high school cheerleader, and it's something that we watched as a group with my squad and in cheerleading camps and things like that. So I've had a lot of fun with this, and so I know other people who know quotes to this movie as well, jokes about spirit fingers and being a cheer-tater, so.
Okay, that's another question. This is not a parody of cheerleading. Is it a lampoon?
Not, but it's satirical. It's having fun with it, but it's not making fun of the people in it. That's more like,
the a cappella movie that came out a year or so ago.
But there was also one that, Fired Up. That was a cheerleading spoof. Now, that's a cheerleading spoof that happened, I think, a couple years back, maybe 2006 or so. And it's a joke because the acronyms of the cheerleading camp that these two guys went to, and they're the only two boys
at the
in there. Yeah, and of course it's, "Go F you!" And everyone has to yell, "Go F you!"
Of course, Fairfield University. Right?
Yeah, something like that. But in Bring It On, it's very serious about the competition. There's also a little critique about race in there, which I thought I picked up on even while watching it. A lot of the cheers that the richer LA school takes from the not so richer LA school that's outside the city in Compton, they were stealing cheers from them. And everyone and because the other school had money and could be sent to competitions, they were winning the awards for cheers that the other school was writing.
Right. I mean, essentially, it takes it doesn't take all of the cheerleaders seriously, but it takes the cheerleading seriously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did Kirsten Dunst ever come back to the franchise? Or is that just the one film she did?
I think it's the one film she did. Because I think Hayden Panettiere from Heroes did the third one, and that was the last that I've...
Oh, I wasn't even aware it was a series. I just knew
the direct-to-DVD series. They did 2 and 3, but
Yeah, no.
That help anyone who saw those?
Yeah, no. Kirsten Dunst, I mean, she's in the Spider-Man movies or the original Spider-Man movies. She's been doing art house films. She's not doing direct to DVD stuff.
Or at least her agent would prefer not.
We might have missed it, but
well, if some bills were dangled in front of her, perhaps.
Could be. I don't think those movies were made for a lot of money. The first Bring It On's definitely where it's at. So Bring It On's also going to be joining Friday the 13th Part 8 on July 5th and 6th. But the following weekend, July 12th and 13th, is Taxi Driver, which I thought was a really interesting midnight movie choice.
And they're playing it on 35. If you haven't seen it on 35, this is a great opportunity.
Yeah, but a midnight movie. That is weird. I mean, Taxi Driver is one of the classic films in the 1970s.
It's violent enough?
Yeah, I suppose, but that's
easy enough.
But it's a very intelligent movie. I mean, it basically playing it as a midnight movie is reducing it to its lowest common denominator. It's much more than that. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. I'm just thinking it's an odd choice.
I do enjoy the midnight movies playtime because that's probably one of the few times I do actually regularly get to go to the movie theater. I'm actually old enough to have seen Taxi Driver first run. All right.
Yeah. Sort of New York. Had to hear cab drivers saying, that movie isn't really what we're like. Which was, of course, not the point of the movie at all. If you haven't seen Taxi Driver, it is, like I said, one of the landmark films in the career of Martin Scorsese and also in the star. He's kind of a hack actor now, but back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you might be surprised. Robert De Niro was considered one of the greatest actors of his generation. And if you wonder why, after seeing some of his more recent films, go see Taxi Driver.
Buckley. He could have a comeback.
Yeah, he could.
Or he could be doing a Cher's farewell tour.
I think he's phoning it in. I think he just doesn't care anymore. Yeah. But Taxi Driver is not only a great film and in a lot of different ways. It was the start of a great collaboration because De Niro and Scorsese made a whole bunch of films together.
Mean Streets beforehand.
They had done Mean Streets, but then he was part of an ensemble. And starting with Taxi Driver, De Niro essentially became Scorsese's on screen. I don't want to say alter ego. He wasn't supposed to be Martin Scorsese, but he was, it was like the two of them. There was the director and the star, and they were of a single mind. So like when the following year they're doing New York together, Liza Minnelli was complaining that she couldn't follow what was going on because they were talking almost on a shorthand.
Yeah. Great scene with Martin Scorsese as the jilted lover in the backseat of the cab.
Yes. As a psychopath. Yeah. And we have time for a quick funny story. Many years later, I interviewed David Cronenberg. And Cronenberg talks about meeting Martin Scorsese for the first time. And at that point, Cronenberg had just done Scanners, the one with the exploding head. And Scorsese looks at him and he says, "You did that? You look so normal. You look like a Beverly Hills gynecologist." And Cronenberg says he couldn't believe this is the guy who did Taxi Driver saying the director of this, outrageously violent movie looks normal. Like, really, of all people not to get that. Oh. But yes, go see Taxi Driver.
Yes.
I believe Albert Brooks' performance in that is kind of, doesn't really get much conversation writing. I think it's kind of underrated. He's terrific. He's well cast, and he's
he's really has only done a small number of films, and of the ones that he's done, he's really only outstanding in a small number of them. This is one of them. Yes, it's a very interesting performance. Sybil Shepherd. I've seen the film recently, and it's like, no, she's not just this plastic blonde in the movie. She actually is an interesting character in it. And Leonard Harris, the guy who plays the political candidate, people don't know this now. I mean, they don't know the name. He was a media critic. He was a critic in New York. And Scorsese cast him as the politician in the movie.
What's that say about critics?
I just kind of got the impression.
Putting us on the level of politicians.
I felt like De Niro's, antagonism here was a lot of it was focused on Albert Brooks' character. Like this was the guy that he had to get beyond. This is the guy that he had to look out for.
Well, without giving the plot points away for people who haven't seen the film or will be seeing it for the first time, I mean, people know it's a bloody, violent climax to the movie. In fact, it was so shocking at the time, they actually had to denature the red in the film. They had to tone it down because if it had looked like, basically it looks more orange than red. If it had looked like real blood, of course it was all stage blood, but if it had looked like real blood, it probably would have gotten an X. They avoided that by making it almost dreamlike.
And I'm kind of surprised we haven't yet mentioned Harvey Keitel or Jodie Foster.
Oh yeah. Great all the way around. I think this is like a restored print that they were releasing to Reparatory a couple years ago.
And while we're showing off that we know so much of it, because it's a film that has to be seen. It is also Bernard Herrmann's final film score. Bernard Herrmann, who started out doing Citizen Kane, doing the music, would go on to do some of Hitchcock's great films, including North by Northwest, Vertigo, and Psycho. Did some work with Francois Truffaut. By the 70s, was considered very old-fashioned. He did a few films with Brian De Palma, and his final film score, which he finished recording in early 1976, shortly before the film came out, and died not that long thereafter. So this is considered his final score. It's a lovely jazz score.
It is. It also, I believe, captures the sleaziness of Times Square.
That is on July 12th and 13th at the Coolidge Corner Midnight for their big screen classics movie series. They have Raiders of the Lost Ark on July 1st and Lawrence of Arabia on July 8th. Both of which are movies that I enjoy and really went to see on the big screen. Both of the, I think only Raiders is going to be on 35.
I was just going to ask.
I know Lawrence of Arabia, they're doing this brand new 4K restoration, digital.
Has the Coolidge had a digital projector for a while?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I should know this.
Yes, about Raiders of the Lost Ark is a lot of fun. I mean, I am not a huge Steven Spielberg fan, but if I was making a short list of the Spielberg movies I liked, I would include Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Dan, this is a big step for you.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I like a few of his films, and this is one of them. This is the film that saved his career, because he had flopped big time with 1941. It was a disaster. And he was kind of floundering. And he could have been, hey, whatever happened to that guy who did Jaws back in the 70s? Instead, his buddy George Lucas, he and Spielberg went out to the beach and they started kicking ideas around. And Lucas produced Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it was his backing that got that movie made, and it became a hit, put Spielberg back on top, and the following year he did E.T., and of course the rest is history.
And Lucas had all those piles of money lying around from a little thing called Star Wars.
I remember seeing at 7-Eleven back when in the week that the movie came out, they were on the front cover of Time, and I'm like, well, I got to see this now.
Right. But now let's talk about Lawrence of Arabia.
Yes.
If you have seen, I'm talking now to the vast podcast audience, if you have seen Lawrence of Arabia on your TV screen, on your iPad, on your iPhone, you have not seen Lawrence of Arabia. This is one of those very few movies that absolutely demands to be seen on the biggest screen you can get to. I have seen it before at the Coolidge when it is done right, and I expect they're going to do a nice job with this. Yes. It's magnificent. It is really one of the great film masterpieces. In fact, I'm hoping to take my daughter to go see it because she's never seen it. It is a brilliant film. It's one of these movies, I forget what the running time is. I think it's almost like 4 hours.
3:36.
Okay, so it's 3.5 hours, and I'm somebody who's like, checking my watch at an hour and a half, 2 hours. This is a movie that at 3.5 hours, if they said, intermission, then the movie does have an intermission. But if they said, now come back for more, I would have been there for more.
Yeah.
It is a masterpiece. See it on the big screen.
It's one of those films you don't feel like it's, 300 minutes.
Right. It goes, and what I find very interesting is that with the exception of one scene in the background, there are no women in this movie. Mm-hmm. And this is a movie that is very popular with everyone, with men and with women. I know a lot of women who consider this among their favorite films because it is so well written and so well acted. It's so beautifully directed. It's just fantastic. There's a wonderful story about the 1980s restoration when David Lean was still alive. When they were putting the film back together, they had to actually bring in some of the actors to redub lines, and they brought in Rich Little to dub in a few lines for actors who had died. The comic impressionist.
I didn't know that.
But the really fun story is they're in the editing room and they're putting footage back in and they're restoring it to its glory. And all of a sudden, Lean says to the editor, "The camel's going in the wrong direction." He goes, "What are you talking about?" "No, the camels, they're going in the wrong direction." He goes, No, I've got the running sheet here. That's the way the camels go. He says, "No, they printed it the wrong way. Apparently, since 1962, the camels in one shot were going in the opposite direction that Lean had intended because they had flipped the film. And now in the restoration, they put it back the way he meant."
Wow.
So we'll probably see the
right way.
The way camels were supposed to go.
I think they shot it like over 3 years because Peter O'Toole, he said there's a moment in the film, and I don't know where it is, but I saw him interviewed where he said there's a moment in the film where you see him and he's 22 years old and they cut to a close-up and he's 25.
Yes.
And he knows, when they shot it, and he said for him it was jarring because he knew that it was 3 years apart, even though it's the same scene.
And I actually got to see Peter O'Toole talk about some of his experiences filming Lawrence of Arabia, and that was obviously a big moment for any film fan.
Yeah.
The Charge of Aqaba scene, where it was he and Omar Sharif were to lead a charge down a hill to this little city down by the sea, and they were going to be doing it on camels, which was very bumpy and not on a steep slope, so at any point they can turn over. So Omar Sharif decided to tie himself to his camel, and so Peter O'Toole said, "I'm going to tie myself to the camel." And as they're doing this, they start drinking, and they're like, it's not going to be fun, so they're crazy drunk as they throw themselves basically down. They make it, but their camels keep going through the ocean, so by the time it reaches, they finally stop at the ocean shoreline, and both of them had flipped upside down and were trying to keep from drowning.
This features perhaps the most famous edit in film history, but the match to the desert,
the sun,
which I believe David Lean likened the process of editing that to sex.
Yes, well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I give as an example, there's a scene early on where Lawrence is riding the desert with a guide, and they stop at this watering hole. And it's this long shot, and you see first way off in the distance this little speck, and with very few edits, you see somebody ride across the expanse of the desert, and it's Omar Sharif's entrance to the film.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say what happens for people who haven't seen it, but I can't imagine a filmmaker being allowed to do a shot like that today, where it just goes on, and really the point of the scene is, we're in the desert, and look how big it is. And well, let me advise people who are going to see the film. First of all, you don't want to get drunk because you don't want to run to the bathroom. There is an intermission, or there should be an intermission for the movie.
I would hope so.
But the script by Robert Bolt, which won an Oscar, the movie won a lot of Oscars. The script is magnificent. To me, it is one of the most quotable scripts this side of Casablanca. There were so many lines of dialogue that you just go, I wish people in real life talked like this.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what it looks like in 4K digital projection.
Yeah.
If it adds to it, or if maybe some people consider this a travesty.
We'll find out. The programmer at the Coolidge who told me that it was going to be the digital file told me to give it a chance because he was so impressed by the quality of it that it would have been better than if they had used a beat up 70mm print. So maybe it is worth it.
I wonder how old Peter O'Toole is by now. He must be early 80s, I suppose. You think?
Yeah. Something around there. But it's Peter O'Toole, it's Alec Guinness, Omar Sharif,
Claude Rains, yes.
One of my favorite characters in that. All fine actors.
Yeah, Jose Ferrer.
Yeah. And
Jack Hawkins. No, it's just a great cast. And Guinness has some of the pearliest lines. He just has, you go, oh my goodness. That's, like he was born to deliver some of this dialogue. He just has some great moments. Oh, and Anthony Quinn. Mm-hmm. A line that I love to quote from that movie when at one point they have this big raid and now all the Bedouins are like taking their booty and Anthony Quinn goes, "I am a river to my people."
I don't think you'll ever be able to film a train scene like that. Just
no.
Astonishing.
It's done.
It's all digital now. So.
Well, I'll tell you, we'll talk about another train scene a little later on in the podcast that also you wouldn't do the same way today.
Well, that's going to be July 8th at 7 p.m. on Monday.
That's going to sell. They always do really well with those Monday big classic screenings.
Yeah, so it's worth getting your tickets early. So moving across the river, we're going to talk about the Brattle.
The Brattle Theatre in Harvard Square.
Yes. And they're unveiling their new DCP with a repertory series of a bunch of classic films, including Double Indemnity, Guns of Navarone, La Dolce Vita, Safety Last, Alien, Phantom of the Paradise, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, West Side Story, Badlands, and Jaws.
They couldn't get any well-known titles?
But all on DCP, which a lot of people, and I know some critics have issue with, but it is the wave of the future. And I really appreciate the Brattle's effort in this to make it easier. Like, they're still going to dedicate themselves to programming the stuff that we wouldn't get the chance to see otherwise on the big screen. So,
Guns of Navarone, my Aunt Evie's favorite film of all time.
West Side Story, which I'm excited for.
I saw West Side Story. This is, of course, not the way it's going to be done at the Brattle, but I saw West Side Story 2 years ago at the Hollywood Bowl with a live orchestra. They stripped out the orchestra track from the soundtrack and had a live orchestra accompanying the film.
With a 70mm film, you can probably do that.
Yes.
Well, I was going to say, I think, I don't know if it was 70mm, but I definitely saw it on film at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood as well. Huh. So that seemed to be the place to see West Side Story.
I don't think, unless you have the most amazing TV, this is how this movie was made to be seen. Super Panavision 70.
West Side Story holds up, one of the great Broadway musicals, one of the great Hollywood adaptations of a movie musical
and just
of a stage show.
Choreography is still people make fun of it, but it's still remarkable.
Astonishingly great.
Yes, and this was noted even at the time. The neighborhood, they're shooting on location on city streets in Manhattan. Yeah. Some of those buildings and streets don't exist anymore. It was going to be all raised and new housing built after they shot the film.
That's Lincoln Center now, where they filmed some of the
some of it, maybe.
Maybe.
Good film. Now, I didn't memorize the whole list. You two are cheating. You've got computers in front of you with the whole schedule. I want the audience to know I'm doing this without a script. The
titles.
You got cues. Double Indemnity is, for if people have not seen this is a must-see film. Mm-hmm. This is a film that helped establish the genre of film noir. Mm-hmm. Maltese Falcon is 3 years before, but in terms of visual style, Double Indemnity is much more visual style. It's much more influential. 44. No, Double Indemnity is Fred McMurray, Barbara Stanwyck, and Edward G. Robinson. Yeah. And it's
with Billy Wilder at the helm.
Right, with Billy Wilder directing, and the script is by Wilder and Raymond Chandler, adapting the James Cain novel. And I could tell you so many stories about the making of that movie because I do lectures on it.
Ask Dan sometime on the street.
Right. You know, it's an incredible film with a lot of twists and turns of the plot. But one of the funniest things, if you're a fan of old movies, is what is Fred MacMurray doing playing the villain? Mm-hmm. Because, you know, Fred MacMurray is remembered from the TV show My Three Sons for doing the Disney Flubber movies in the late 50s, early 60s. And in the 30s and 40s, he would do a lot of these light romantic comedies. Well, he was at the end of his Paramount contract. They didn't care what happened to his career. So when Billy Wilder wanted him to play a murderer, you know, he is the protagonist, but he is a murderer.
If I recall, is he trying to get away from
it's an insurance claim.
It's an insurance
scam. He is an insurance salesman, and he has an affair with Barbara Stanwyck, and they figure out how to set up this insurance scam.
They're trying to stage this thing on the train.
Right. Years later, AFI is doing a tribute to Billy Wilder, and Fred MacMurray gets up and he says, you know, in all my career, I made so many films and, you know, I played so many different parts. And the only 2 times I ever played a bad guy was for Billy Wilder in Double Indemnity in The Apartment. And those are the only 2 movies of mine that anybody ever wants to talk about. Huh. And he goes, Billy Wilder saw something in me that nobody else did.
Must have been the case, because he is disturbing in The Apartment.
Yes,
because he's a nice guy, and then he subverts that.
Yeah,
you know?
Right, and it's the same thing here. I mean, he's basically this straight and narrow insurance salesman guy who falls into temptation. And, you know, and Barbara Stanwyck as the femme fatale, and it was funny because the head of the studio was so upset. Barbara Stanwyck is wearing this long blonde wig. Yeah. She looks like George Washington. Why do you have her dressed up like this?
The movie is so wonderfully filmed, and Edward G. Robinson's character, who plays the insurance boss, he's like so keen to detail that it gives MacMurray's character no room for mistake. He can't breathe incorrectly.
Yes, I'll give you two little tidbits if you go to see Double Indemnity. One is, the movie you want to see next is Body Heat, because that's essentially a remake of Double Indemnity. It's not credited that way, but it can be seen that way. And the second thing is, watch who lights whose cigarette in Double Indemnity. I'm not going to say anything else. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Watch how cigarettes and cigars get lit and who's lighting whose cigarette, because Wilder is using that as a shorthand to signal relationships. And in fact, I went to a series of Billy Wilder films back in the 70s and saw many, you know, like within 2 months or a whole bunch of them, and started noticing he does this in a lot of his films.
Really?
But watch it in Double Indemnity. So anything else on the list that we want to
I was just about to say, another fun thing I just realized with the list, it's almost one of every genre. So we have film noir represented, we have Western represented, foreign film with La Dolce Vita, we have sci-fi and Alien and Phantom of the Paradise. The Good and Bad and the Ugly is another Western musical with West Side Story.
Good and Bad and the Ugly. What's the other Western?
Guns of Navarone.
No, that's a war movie.
War movie.
It's a World War II movie. Yeah, no,
that's why I don't know it. I hate World War II movies.
No,
History Channel ruined me. So
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is one of the great Sergio Leone westerns, and that again you want to see on a nice big screen in a nice crystal clear print.
Cannot overemphasize that enough. That's the way it was, intended.
It took me a long time to warm up to it, the Italian approach to filmmaking. And one of the ways I got into it was through Dario Argento horror movies and Sergio Leone westerns, because I understood those genres. And now I'm going in and seeing what they're doing with it visually. Whereas if you go in cold to Fellini or someone I don't like, Antonioni, it could be tough going if you don't get it to the rhythm of the storytelling.
Well, he was criticized for his close-ups, which
his intense
close-ups, which on a large screen like that can be really overwhelming. But he went for it anyway. He was all about showing the contours, the landscape of someone's face.
All the Sergio Leone are worth seeing. I'm not going to criticize the Brattle for showing The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think that's, it's a great film. People should go see it. I hope the next time they do this, they show Once Upon a Time in the West. It's one of the rare movies in which Henry Fonda plays a bad guy.
All right.
Vicious bad guy. And they make that clear right at the very beginning when there's a scene where this family is being wiped out by Fonda's gunmen. And I forget what the character's name is, but somebody shouts out his name. What do you want me to do with the little boy? And Fonda goes, well, now that he's heard my name, and he shoots the kid. That's how you know he's the bad guy.
You know what's also great on the big screen? Duck You Sucker, or Once Upon a Revolution. Yes. Terrific. With James Coburn. It'll give you a whole new impression of James Coburn.
Yes, and of course, now this Good, the Bad, the Ugly is, I think, the last of the Leone spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And this, so you're basically seeing the invention or reinvention of Clint Eastwood's career. Because this is what made him into an international star, that he was able to come back. He had been a TV actor. Now he was a movie star, and he credits Sergio Leone and Don Siegel, who did the Dirty Harry film, with basically launching his Hollywood career and with teaching him a lot about directing. In fact, Unforgiven, I believe, is dedicated to the two of them.
Wow.
So, and the last genre that is playing over at the Brattle for their DCP debut is silent, with Safety Last, starring Harold Lloyd, which
Well, after school in the 70s, we come home. Sometimes there would be a Charlie Chaplin film on TV, or like The Little Rascals, Our Gang, something like that.
That's nice. I had to find mine on YouTube.
Yeah, this is
very different.
We're all sharing now.
his great granddaughter, who manages his estate, believes that he didn't get into the public consciousness the way Chaplin and some of the other silent film stars did, because his films weren't offered to TV for syndication. He didn't allow them to be edited for commercials.
Right. Yep. Right. And so, the silent comedians were forgotten for a while, except for Chaplin. I mean, Chaplin was always the special case. But then I think it was like 48, 49, there was a famous essay by, I think it was Walter Kerr, Four Clowns, about the great age of silent comedy, which brought Chaplin and Keaton and Harold Lloyd, and the one most people forget because they haven't seen anything, Harry Langdon, back into the public consciousness. And so in the 50s and 60s, now I'm a child of the 60s. I'm growing up, I'm seeing not only some of these films on TV, but there were the compilation films when comedy was king, when silence was golden, that had all these shorts of these, I forgot the guy who did it, but that's where I saw some of the Laurel and Hardy silent comedy shorts.
Right, I was thinking the same thing.
And because they would show these compilation films. Lloyd, I didn't discover until I was out of college. When I was even taking film classes, I was seeing Chaplin and Keaton. And I saw Lloyd when, I guess maybe it was his daughter, granddaughter, started putting them into circulation so that people could see them. And that's where I got to see Grandma's Boy and Safety Last and The Freshman and movies like that I'd only read about.
And it's also interesting that in some way his films are responsible for the evolution of a two-reeler to a three-reeler to a four-reeler to what we know is, or what we've come to accept as, a 90-minute feature. Yeah, and it was basically done in the sense that, like, how much of this can you handle? And so he was also one of the pioneers of test screening. So they'd take the reels out and they'd show it and they'd say, wow, the audience can handle this for 50 minutes. Let's do more.
Yeah, Lloyd had an interesting career. We don't have to get into the whole side discussion of what he segued into sound. He made some sound films in the 30s, and they're not bad, but it was they're not great.
What is it? The Sin of
No. I'm talking the 30s. I'm talking the early 1930s. He did some talkies, and then he retired, and then he 50s, came back in the late 40s to do a film with Preston Sturges called The Sins of Harold Diddlebach. And that was his last film, and that was a disaster.
Yeah.
That was a big mistake for all concerned. And then he had invested his money very wisely. Not all of the silent movie stars did. He put his money into real estate. He was very well off. And what he dabbled in the rest of his life, and apparently made quite a name for himself, was 3D photography.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can
Very
get
good.
books of his 3D photography. So, this was someone who was constantly, fascinated by, the technology. Now, another thing, a lot of
He
people
was a tinkerer.
that people don't know about Harold Lloyd, and watch this. In one of his early shorts, one of his props, an explosive prop, went off
I had read
and took off parts of, I think, 2 of his fingers.
it was 2 of
Right.
his fingers. It was his index and middle, and I thought it was for a photo, like a press photo.
Oh, it was a photo? Okay.
Yeah.
And so for his films thereafter, he had like a glove fitted over his hand, so it would look like he had a hand that without the missing finger parts.
Right. His
So
pinky
actually,
and his
when
index finger were sewn together,
Yeah.
so when he moved his other fingers, they
would
looked
go.
like it was.
Yeah.
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 On the glove, not.
Yeah. And when you see him climbing the side of the building in safety last, it's with only half of that hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're wondering, gee, how come, if you notice how come his hand looks funny, that's why. Now the great thing about Safety Last that has remained influential, I actually interviewed a guy who was doing a TV commercial of the 1980s inspired by Safety Last because he researched how did Harold Lloyd do it. When you're watching the movie, the famous image that everybody knows from Safety Last, even if they don't know who Harold Lloyd was, is a man hanging from the hands of a clock over a city street. Well, how did he do that without risking his life? That's not a real clock. That's a mock-up built on the roof of a building, and the camera is using a forced perspective, so it looks like he's hanging over the street. In fact, he's only a few feet off the ground. Now, he might have hurt himself if he fell, but he wasn't falling to the street.
And you know what? It actually relates to Aldrich's film "Kiss Me Deadly" because at the end of the street, I think there's this famous. It's like a short-run railway that goes up this short hill. They realized that if you built the set at the top of this hill, just right at the entrance of this railway, it gave you the impression that you were at the top of this building. And if you built the set to the perspective of the street, it was like you were right there.
Yep. And Kevin Brownlow in his 13-part documentary series on silent movies in Hollywood actually diagrams how Harold Lloyd did it.
Really?
And which street in LA it was.
Right.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that there was a 13-part documentary on silent
Yeah, it
films.
was done in the late 80s. I had seen an interview with him, and he mentioned the fact that so many people had asked him to please re-release that. It's only available on VHS, and I tried looking for it, and you could buy it only from private collectors for hundreds of dollars.
Well, it's fascinating
And
that
it showed on PBS, but
Really?
then because of all the rights they would need to re-release it, he'll never be able to do it again.
Well, I think for a number of years, people wanted to know the secret to some of the effects, the visual tricks that they had done in these silent films, and there wasn't documentation for it. They were secretive about this.
Well, and the thing was, he did a lot of the interviews with people who were still alive from the era. So he used archival footage for a lot of like Harold Lloyd's interviews and Buster Keaton's interviews, but he was able to get an interview with, I think it's Jackie Coogan, who did the kid,
Yes.
who played the kid for Chaplin. He did a whole episode just on silent comedians and the 4 silent comedians, and he was able to get that interview with him.
All right. Well, so are we?
But along with Safety Last, that's also going to be playing again at the Somerville Theater.
Yes, and that I could talk about because as we're recording this, we are allowed to say we're recording this. People know this isn't live.
Oh, real quick, the DCP features are going to start June 24th over at the Brattle, so Monday, June 24th, and their schedule will be online.
Yes. On the day we're recording this, I got to enjoy The Kid. The Charlie Chaplin film that we just talked about, with live musical accompaniment at the Somerville. And they've got coming up that once a month they're going to do a silent classic. They're trying to do it with, 35 millimeter prints. They're showing July 14, they're showing Ben-Hur, the silent one with Francis X. Bushman and Raymond Navarro, with one of the great, the chariot race in the 59 Charlton Heston film is pretty impressive, but the one in the silent version is pretty impressive too. And they dug up a 1907 13-minute version of Ben-Hur.
Really?
That they're going to show as the, sort of like the short film prior to the feature.
I recall this is something that the projectionist over there, David Kornfeld, been wanting to do for a while.
Yes.
Yes.
So they are doing that.
He programmed.
That's July 14th. August 4th, they're showing Buster Keaton's The General, which is, I love Keaton. I really enjoy Chaplin. Chaplin's a genius. Chaplin's wonderful. I love Keaton. And The General is his masterpiece. The destruction of the train at the end of the film probably would not be done today because they actually show a bridge being blown up and the train falling into the ravine. They had to get it in a single shot, and apparently for years the wreckage of that train was a tourist attraction.
Still there?
Is it still there? I don't know.
The iron was taken during World War II.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But for many years it was a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
Great film. Then September 8th, they're showing Harold Lloyd in The Freshman, and then Harold Lloyd in Safety Last on October 6th. Or, presumably with shorts as well. They were telling me they're hoping to get a horror film in for around Halloween.
Yep.
And they said they had a big crowd today.
Oh, good.
For the really, I was impressed. A big crowd for the kid, and I'm hoping. And they even said, if we keep getting audiences like this, we want to keep doing this forever.
These films on the big screen, I've come to just see that they are just much more affecting.
And in fact, the Ben-Hur print, the main, apparently the short is going to be a 16 millimeter print because it's so rare. But the main feature is apparently coming out of the studio vaults. That they are getting an archival print. So
because that's all that's going to be left in a few years.
Right.
Dan, would you know, is The Freshman the first film that Harold Lloyd donned the circular spectacles?
Oh no, I don't.
It in shorts.
It's shorts. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've covered the Silence, and what else is the Somerville?
On the evening side at the Somerville Theater, they have The Golden Voyage of Sinbad on June 22nd for their midnight feature, and then they're doing a special. It's almost an all-night presentation with a lecture before, and then a screening of the Blair Witch Project, all on the evolution of found footage horror. So Blair Witch Project is one of the first big major breakout ones. Is Cannibal Holocaust, the first found footage.
Right. Paranormal Activity.
Wreck, which I really like.
Yeah.
Who's giving the lecture?
Alexandra West.
I'd be curious to hear the lecture. I have no desire to see the Blair Witch Project. I think it was one of the most overrated films.
I've never seen it on the big screen. So
Sinister, the new film Sinister, is a pretty good found footage film.
Yes, so that's one of the few that I've liked,
and of course The Ring, the Japanese.
Yeah, see, most of these I think they're contrived. Did you see what is it, Apollo 17?
No, missed that.
Oh, God, no.
Found footage from the space program. I mean, hilarious.
I think I was working at...
It was Apollo 17 to 18, whatever whatever the last one would have been if they did another one. I forget.
Yeah, I think I was doing I was working at the Regal at that time, and I was doing a theater check, and there was nobody in that audience. So there it's in space, and I'm alone in the theater. And I'm like, I'm going to leave right now before something pops up.
But I would, I don't want to denigrate the speaker. I'm sure what she has is very interesting because this has become, an extremely lucrative subgenre of horror that's been very influential. And with something like Sinister, which was not a found footage film, but it used found footage as part of its storytelling technique.
Yes.
Or fake found footage.
Well, that's what VHS is, and I don't know that we mentioned this. VHS 2 is going to be playing at the Coolidge.
I don't understand the sequel. The first one was so bad.
But the second one's so much better.
Oh, okay. Fine.
Yes.
We'll give it a chance. That happens. That happens. I always hope if I'm going to see something new, maybe this one will be great. I have been surprised.
So here's the thing with found footage, because I usually roll my eyes whenever I see this. But if it's done so well that it feels like something fresh, I think it's almost more of a challenge for a director to get something that's so well trodden and used and almost abused and make it something new and fresh and make it their own style. I'm thinking of Gareth Evans. He did a sequence in VHS 2 that everyone's been talking about online, and it's the favorite for a lot of people coming out of that. It deals with an occult. So it's people going to investigate this so-called school, and it turns out to be a cult, and then they are trapped inside. So it gets.
I'm intrigued. I just watched The Raid Redemption again last night. So
imagine that
he's a talented filmmaker
with found footage on VHS, sort of shakiness, and it actually frightened me more than anything I had seen this year.
Well, actually, I mean, along the lines of found footage, what was the J.J. Abrams one?
Super 8.
No,
That's not really
no,
found
footage.
Cloverfield.
Cloverfield.
I like that we both thought of Super 8. Though.
No, Cloverfield. I liked Cloverfield because it was a movie that was sort of like The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, one of those 50s monster movies, where instead of following the general and the scientist and, the people fighting the monster, you were following the people who were screaming in the background and running away. And I thought that was an interesting take on that kind of story.
Interesting. I just hated the marketing that was around it because he purposely hid what a lot of the movie was about. Like one of the trailers, I believe, he doesn't even have the name of the movie in it, which is a little.
Well,
that's why I didn't like Blair Witch Project, because they were actually hyping it as if it really was found footage. And it was like, oh, come on. How can anybody be so stupid to believe this is for real?
Fine.
And there were people who did.
Those were not the trailers that were playing in front of my movies back in 1999.
Chronicle, which came out a year ago, is a fine film.
You're on your own on that one.
I don't remember what Chronicle.
It's
the kids who discover in a hole that they get.
Oh yeah, you are on your own. No, there are people who like it. You're not entirely alone, but no, I was not impressed with it. I was disappointed.
And then jumping to July 5th and 6th at midnight, they're going to be playing Drive, which is one of my favorite films from 2011.
Speaking of great Albert Brooks performances.
Yes. And Ryan Gosling.
Who?
Ryan Gosling.
Who?
Yeah. That's okay. It's for us youngins.
I know who Ryan Gosling is.
And then on July 13th, on Saturday, they're going to be playing Day of the Dead with a double feature of Nightmare Factory, which is a new film, but I'm more excited for Day of the Dead. It's also going to be one's supposed to be 35 millimeter.
That's not Dawn of the Dead.
No, Day of the Dead.
Day of the Dead. That's the third
one in Miami.
All right.
So it's tropical zombies.
Who directed Day of the Dead? Is it Tom Savini?
Director is Romero.
Yeah. Okay. I saw it, but I don't.
It's silly, but it's still fun.
It's the original, and then Dawn of the Dead that are considered like the real outstanding ones in the series.
Yeah.
But Day of the Dead, I can't remember the last time it was shown around here, so that's certainly...
The Coolidge showed it maybe within the last year or so. I remember seeing it there. That's the first time I've seen it. And then now they're going to play it again on the 13th.
Some would say he's never really gotten back, to the greatness of those early ones, even though he continues to make them.
Yeah.
Well, he made some non-zombie films that are kind of interesting. That his whole career is worth a fresh look. Like, have you ever seen Martin?
No, I've not.
His vampire film. It is different from any other vampire film you've ever seen. It's the vampire as basically this normal and somewhat disturbed kid, and then the Night Riders, which actually has some interesting people in the cast, including Ed Harris.
Did see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Monkey Shines, I think, is another one of his.
He did a Stephen King?
Yes, I think.
The Monkey Shines, I'm thinking of the Dark Half.
Okay,
Monkey
no.
Shines,
Monkey Shines is the paraplegic who has the monkey who's helping him. And he did stuff with Stephen King. He did Creepshow.
You're right. Yep. You're drawing some titles here. Impressive.
Jumping back into the Harvard area, Harvard Square area in Cambridge, we have the Harvard Film Archive, which is going to be back in July. They're taking a little vacation in June, but in July they're going to be playing a Burt Lancaster series and a Hitchcock series. Not all the information is out yet, but from what I can see on their calendar for July, they have titles such as Vertigo, The Lodger, Frenzy, the silent version of Blackmail, To Catch a Thief, and Rope, just to name a few.
Okay, well, Hitchcock, of course...
they do have the sound version of Blackmail.
Okay, Hitchcock doesn't need us to sell him. He's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time.
But just to make sure that people know that this is playing.
Right, I want to focus on the two silent ones, because they are not often seen on the big screen and deserve to be seen. The Lodger was Hitchcock's third film as director, and his first... He considered it his first real Hitchcock film. It's about a British family that takes in a lodger who they think may be a serial killer a la Jack the Ripper. And I think it's the first film in which Hitchcock does a cameo. And it shows already at this very young age, Hitchcock, I think he was like 27 when he made it.
So this was late 20s.
Yes. No, this is England. This is in the silent period. And he's experimenting. He has a scene in which the lodger is pacing on the second floor of the house. And the couple whose house it is are in their parlor on the first floor. Now, the obvious way to shoot this, because they hear him pacing, would be to show them in the parlor, show the guy pacing upstairs, cut back to the parlor with them looking at each other and looking at the ceiling. What Hitchcock does is he builds a glass floor. He films the guy pacing on the glass floor from underneath and then does a double exposure of them looking up at the ceiling where you see the footsteps going back and forth across the ceiling. That's Hitchcock at 27 is already playing with film. 2 years later, his final silent film was Blackmail, and I'm very curious to see the silent version because partway through the production, it was decided it would be a sound film. And so I know the sound version very well. I've taught the sound version. If you haven't seen it, absolutely brilliant. The first British talkie, and Hitchcock is experimenting with sound. But I want to see what the silent version is like to see how it airs.
I may have a copy of it. I have a collection over there of 30 of his films, including Silence.
But do they have
I don't know.
This is part. The BFI has just restored Hitchcock's silence, so the silent film. So this may be a new print.
He does review DVDs, so he might get the BFI release. But
I want to see it on the big screen. I don't want to go over to Steve's house to watch it. Or unless Steve is now a new showcase in our list. So we've done the Brattle, the Coolidge, the Somerville, and Steve's place.
Yeah.
I'd like people to come over and watch film.
All right, so everybody over at Steve's place next Tuesday night. So what are you serving?
It's hard. It's when
we're just kidding, folks.
Blu-ray doesn't do it for people. No. Seeing 35 and Blu-ray is not a viable option.
Way that you can see a film, and I do understand that, but at the same time, it's such a great experience to be able to see it on 35, because it's certainly not anything you can set up at your house.
It's great, but that's not the way it's going to be in the future.
All right, now I got to wait. I was being nice. There are certain movies that absolutely you should see on a big screen. Mm-hmm. If you have the Lawrence of Arabia, we talked about 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you haven't seen that on a big screen, you have not seen it. That must be seen on a big screen.
West Side Story.
But most of these movies, if you see Casablanca on a nice sized TV screen, you've seen Casablanca. You've seen Annie Hall. Yes,
I still like seeing it with an audience that quotes it with me.
Yes, seeing it with an audience is a different experience. I'm not taking away from that. But the idea, I'm a purist. I will only see it if it's projected in 35 millimeter the way it was done. Well, wait a second. Are you seeing it on silver nitrate?
There's going
because
to be...
those 1930s films have all been transferred to safety stock. So you're not seeing it the way it was made. So some of these purists, I think, go a little overboard. I'll go see the digital Lawrence of Arabia. Maybe I'll be disappointed. I don't think so. I don't think it's as much of a problem as some people are making it out to be.
I'd love to say that the films that are currently, the few that are being made on 35 are going to be shown that way, but they're not. And even those of us that really want to just, if we have the opportunity, our first experience of a film is going to be 35. That's not going to be that way in the future. There's just no way out of it. 99% of all theaters in the United States now have digital.
Right. If we want to have it,
or first run theaters, I should say.
I was going to say, it doesn't take away from the fact that I do still want to see it presented in 35, and I'd rather pay money to go see it presented in 35 than to see it digitally.
There is a valid issue in terms of these digital films in terms of preservation. We don't know how long a digital copy of a film will last.
Going to say,
that's true.
In projection, because there have been plenty of incidents in critic screenings. There are a bunch of us that are just ready to complain, and they mess up the projection.
Or not even the film itself, as it's a digital file, but there's still a question as to the storage process,
right?
As to whether the storage is capable of
50 years from now, will people be able to say, a classic of this year, the film to be named later? Will they be able to see that, or will they go, "Oh my goodness, look at that! The whole digital file fell apart"? We don't know. That's a valid issue.
It's a current. That's what Film Comment is wrestling with now. They have a new feature that they're going to have in every issue called Restoration Row. Yeah. And the 99% statistic I threw out there was from the current issue of Film Comment, and their concerns about digital storage.
Yes, and that is absolutely fair. But, it's like when you think that most people now are experiencing movies in their home off of cable, off of DVD, and, I can't say that's wrong. There are, like I said, there are certain movies you absolutely should see on a big screen because you're missing an element of it. But if you, I saw it, in this presentation rather than that presentation, well, I don't know if you lost anything.
Well, in my case, where I love silent film, and I do go pay to go see it played live with a musical accompaniment, right. Because even though I've seen each of Chaplin's films probably 3 times each, if not more, already, they've all been off of my computer or off of TCM, and I still don't get the same feel as live music. Or just the laughter of an audience. It's still part of the experience of going to the movies, but it's still something that you don't get.
Yes. But look, I love comedies. I wrote a book on romantic comedies, called I'll Have What She's Having, in case anybody cares. And seeing a comedy with an audience is a special experience. Mm-hmm. But I remember going to the press screening for another great Albert Brooks movie, Lost in America. And it was myself and one other critic.
Well, that's definitely an underrated film.
It was just the two of us sitting in the screening room watching this movie, and we roared, and we did not need an audience to tell us the movie was funny. And I have, and there have been times when my reaction to a movie has been very different from the audience reaction, especially since the press often sees a movie with, essentially a bunch of shills, people who've come in to see it for free. And, we're seeing it for free too, but we're seeing it because it's part of our job. And there's, hey, I'm getting a free movie out of this. And so they're primed to be all excited about it. And it's always great when they're not. And I could say that in the review. Even the people seeing it for free hated it.
Mm. I'd have to say, we're lucky here in Boston. We have theaters that show that still have 35 millimeter capability. We also have the Harvard Film Archive, which continually shows films on 35 and has a vast amount of movies that they can draw upon.
Digital as well.
So for all the complaining, I'm, gotta say we're pretty lucky still.
Yeah, well, so the other argument that I was saying before with projection, I once took my mother to go see the last Harry Potter film because it was a tradition. She and I would go and see the Harry Potter films since they first started coming out. So I went back home, I saw it with her, and the theater that we had gone to, which had been like the theater that I'd gone to all throughout childhood, it left the 3D lens cap on because it was one 3D screening and then non-3D screening, and she can't see 3D. So when we went to that in-between screening, it was dark. And if you remember Harry Potter, the last 8th movie or so, it was dark. It took place at night most of the movie. So it's even darker.
So
it's even darker. So I wanted to get up and tell them that, hey, you idiots left that on. I could see the 2 beams of light that makes it 3D.
Right.
And my mom actually stopped me and said, no, I told you movies are darker. She was just convinced that they've all gone dimmer. And it's because the theater that we had been going to all this time, either because of management or they just don't care, they've just let the value go. So essentially we're paying good amount of money because all ticket prices have been going up. And now we're getting, a third less of the movie than we would have been paying
this has been reported in the press.
Yes. And it's still a problem.
It's still a problem.
So
something else. My problem right now with some of the films we've been talking about is they were at midnight, and as I've gotten older, that's a little past my bedtime. I may, since I live in Somerville now, I may go to the Somerville to some of those midnight screenings because I can walk home, and so that I might do that. But to come out to the Coolidge when, the T isn't running when you come out of the screening.
It's a bit of a trek. Yeah, we talked about that last time.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm impressed, though, that there are still so many options for people to see classic films because when I came here in the 70s, when I came here to go to school, there were even more. That was the heyday of the repertory cinema, where the Harvard Square Cinema, which doesn't exist anymore, had a different double feature every day, where the Coolidge Corner on their 2 screens was constant rep. Where there was a Central Square 2-screen cinema, one of them often showing rep, where there was off the wall showing rep. There was all sorts of stuff. The Orson Welles showing mostly new films, but occasionally some revivals as well. So we've lost a lot of screens. We've lost a lot of options. Part of it is because of the home video revolution. I mean, even in New York, a lot of the theaters when I was living in Manhattan that were showing rep aren't doing it anymore, if they even exist anymore. So the marketplace has changed, and the fact that we still have a very vibrant market showing classic films of as we've discussed, a very wide variety. I think that's a very good thing.
People got to go to the movies in order to keep that going.
Yeah. Hopefully younger filmgoers will have the desire to get to a theater and not lose that. You know, or have an experience that makes them realize that this is really worth making the trek to the theater.
Well, if it's any indication, my daughter, who is finishing up her junior year at Brookline High School, when I asked her, would you like to go see The Kid, immediately responded with yes, because I got her into Chaplin and Keaton when she was very young. And, of course, she has her own taste now, and they're not always my taste, and that's as it should be. But what I find funny is that she is turning her friends on to Chaplin and Keaton and other classic films. And they go, why would we want to watch old black and white movies? Why would we want to watch silent films? And then they watch them,
in some
and
way,
they love them.
It's like a revelation sometimes. They realize the artistry that goes on without any sound. You know, the what's being conveyed.
They have to be exposed to it. She told me one friend, she had to twist his arm to watch, I think it was The Gold Rush. Oh, okay, I'll do it. And he watched it. Give me the name of more Chaplin movies. He couldn't believe how much fun it was.
It's like the very moment that you're charmed by one of these things, you're stuck.
Well, that's exactly how I got into movie going, I guess, I talked about that, I think, last time perhaps, was the movie Chaplin. And I thought, wow, this was really ingenious. Who is this guy? And so I went back and started with his old shorts, with Keystone Cops and stuff like that, and just literally went through his filmography.
Wow. That's surprising. I haven't even done that. So you mentioned the Burt Lancaster films, and Burt Lancaster is in many ways an underrated actor who was quite good. I'm surprised. Now, are they going into August with this?
This is actually the month that I showed you was August.
Okay, to be clear again, this is at the Harvard Film Archive.
Oh, because I can't believe they wouldn't show Birdman of Alcatraz and Elmer Gantry.
I was just about to say Elmer Gantry's not on the list, but potentially that could go into September.
It's September, because they are showing From Here to Eternity.
Yep.
And From Here to Eternity is interesting because it's Lancaster, Frank Sinatra, Donna Reed, Ernest Borgnine, Deborah Kerr, and Montgomery Clift. And Lancaster, who had been a former acrobat turned actor, was very self-conscious that he wanted to be good enough. I mean, he really was. He turned into a fine actor. But Montgomery Clift, who was more of a method actor, he had no respect for Burt Lancaster. He called him a big bag of wind. From Here to Eternity, Montgomery Clift was such a method actor.
Yeah.
He learned how to play the bugle because his character was a bugler. Even though the bugle playing would all be dubbed in, he wanted his lips and throat to be the right way. But Lancaster is wonderful in that. And Atlantic City with Susan Sarandon is one of his best of his later in his career performances. Just really, if people are not familiar with Burt Lancaster, there are certain stars, like I was with Bette Davis. I know who she was. And then I think it was the Boston Public Library did a series years ago, and I started going through her 30s and 40s films. I'm going, wow, now I know why she was famous. She was great. This is an opportunity to discover Burt Lancaster. He was a wonderful actor. And they're showing The Leopard, which presumably is the restored version. It was shot in Italy. I think it's Visconti.
Yes.
And excellent film. But what happened was it was originally shown in the United States in a truncated, badly dubbed version.
People might be a little put off by the dub. the voiceover problem.
Right, and I think what they release now is the full cut where it is all dubbed into Italian with subtitles. Because sometimes some of those Italian films of that era, everybody would be speaking their own language and go, oh, what the hell? We're all going to dub this in later.
Yep. Well, that's about it for the Harvard Film Archive. I guess in passing, it's good to mention these are all new films that are coming up, so nothing repertory, but the Roxbury International Film Festival and the Boston French Film Festival are going to be taking place at the MFA, both within the next month.
I plan to go.
So lots of stuff besides superheroes, stupid comedies, and cartoons. And I happen to like some of those superhero, stupid comedy, and cartoons. I'm not knocking all of them. They're fun.
Balanced diet.
But some great classics of all kinds are going to be available.
It'll be interesting to see what kind of turnout the Brattle gets for their DCP screenings and how it's.
We should drop in on a few.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, except for that one critic who's going to be picketing the theater. No, I'm just teasing.
It'll be neat. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Did we get everything?
Yes, we did.
Shall we send listeners to BOFCA.com?
Yes, BOFCA.com.
And
our Facebook account, Boston Online Film Critics Association, and we are on Twitter at BOFCA.
Would it be Facebook.com/BOFCA?
No, it's Boston Online Film Critics Association.
Okay, the whole thing.
And there you can get not only announcements from BOFCA, but those announcements often include our individual reviews, essays, and just starting the video channel. So there's all sorts of content to be discovered about the movies, about new movies, classic films, all sorts of things.
For clarification, we're on Facebook.com/Boston Online Film Critics.
And if people want to send us an email, they can send it to
BostonOnlineFilmCritics@gmail.com.
Cool. This was fun, guys. I'm always uncomfortable about ending these things.
See you at the movies.
That's good. Let's copyright that.
Oh, yeah. No one's ever thought of that one before.
So save us 3 on the aisle.
Front row, please.